Hi everyone! Today we're going to make a chatbot with p5js and Ollama. Here inside my browser, I'm running this chatbot interface. Everything is running locally, including the Ollama Large Language Model. The code setup is pretty simple. The only JavaScript libraries that I'm using are p5js and Ollama.js, and the rest is just HTML and CSS code. If you don't know what Ollama is, there's a video on my channel on how to install and set it up, so please check that out first. Just say hi. And the response is pretty quick because this is only 2 billion model. It's a very small one. Tell me a joke. Aha. Another one, please. It understands the context, it understands the history, so I don't have to say, tell me another joke, please. I can just say another one, please. Then it understands that we are currently talking about a joke because it keeps history. Of course, it's all running on the front-end JavaScript code, so the moment you refresh the page, the history will be gone. And there's a nice little shader gradient background that's animating behind, because the whole background is p5js canvas, so you can load any sketch you have. I will also upload the finished source code on my website for those of you who want to support my channel. Alright, let's jump in and start coding. First, make sure that you have Ollama installed by running Ollama command in your terminal. And then you also want to check what models you have installed. I currently have quite a few different models, but for this tutorial, I will be using Gemma 2:2b model. If you don't have this model and you want to follow along, make sure that you run Ollama full Gemma 2:2b. I'm going to use p5js in instance mode to make it easy to import libraries. And for this, I'll be using a template that I made. So I will git clone template es module .git. And I will clone this onto my desktop, but I will change the name of the folder. To do this, right after this git address, just hit space and type the name of the folder you want. I will name it Chatbot. So now I have Chatbot directory on my desktop. I will cd into it, Chatbot. So from here on, you can open this directory in your favorite code editor, but I'll be using NeoVim right inside the terminal. Once you have opened the directory in your code editor, let's open up index.js file. Here we have simple p5 setup using the instance mode. Now let's run this sketch. You want to open up a new terminal window within the same directory. Let's first install the dependency, npm I, and then we also need one extra package called Ollama. So npm I OLLAMA. Once you have installed, let's run the development server by running npm run dev. The port number you see may be a little different from mine. Just copy this text and open it in the browser. We're going to write this sketch in a few steps. Let's outline it. First, we want to make a request to our model using Ollama.js package. And then we will create HTML input elements. And then we'll look at how we can keep the chat history. And then we will start with canvas text, but then eventually we will replace it with HTML text so that it can be selected and copied. And then we'll do some styling in this order. So the first step, Ollama.js request. I'm going to visit Ollama.js GitHub repo to see how I can make this request to my local Ollama model. And here's a very simple usage example. I'm going to just copy this code and paste it into my sketch. And there are some changes we need to make. First, if you look at my console, there's an error, model llama 3.1 not found. Try pulling it first because it is not installed on my machine. I will be using Gemma 2:2b model for this video. Now the error message is gone, and there you go. When we asked why is the sky blue, then we get a very long answer. I want to make one more change. Instead of importing from Ollama, I will be using Ollama/browser because Ollama package is made for server-side request. So if you want to use it in the browser environment, like with p5js here, then you want to import Ollama object from Ollama/browser. And the second thing is, every time I save my code and refresh the browser, it makes a request right away. And I don't like that. I want to control when I make this chat request. I'm going to have to surround it with some function and call the function when I need to. So here I will make a function called generate and then move this bit of code inside this function. And then we get an error. It says await expressions are only allowed within async functions. Our function needs to be an async function. So add this async keyword in front of function keyword. So async and await always go together. And if you're not familiar with these asynchronous operations, simply speaking, whenever you request, it takes some time to generate a response. And we don't want any other code to be running before we get a response, because if you're trying to console log response.message the content while it's still generating a response, then we'll get an error. So the await keyword makes sure that we get a response first before we run any other code after that. So that's why we're using await keyword. Instead of just console logging it, I want to return response as it is, just like that. And then I can call this function maybe when I press my key. So p.key pressed. If p.key is g, as in generate, then I will call this generate function. And here I will also await the response. Again, because generating response takes time. And before I run any other code, I want to make sure that I got some response. And same error here. Await only works within async functions. So where do I put this async keyword? So the key press is an arrow function. So we'll put async keyword right in front of this parenthesis, async. And everything is good. So I'm going to go to my browser window. And when I hit G key, there's nothing happening, but it is generating and we are awaiting the response. And I made a mistake. So even if we get a response, I am not really like printing anything here. So the generate function returns a response. I will store in a response object, and I will console log the entire object here. And I also add a console log generating, just so we know that the key press works. Back to the browser, hit G key. Now we see it's generating. We're going to have to wait a few seconds. And then we get the response. So response is an object, duration, etc. But what we're really interested in is this message object and the content. So let me rewrite this. Console log response.message.content. And try pressing G again. And now we get the response. I think the response is maybe too long for our simple chat. What we can do is when we send the prompt, like this question here, we can also ask the response to be shorter and simpler. And messages here is an array. That means we can add more objects like that. And there is a special kind of message we can send, which is called system message. The role here is not user, but system. And the content will be some instruction for our chat model to follow. The response must be short and concise. And let's also say, you are a friendly chatbot. How about that? So when we are sending a request to our chat model, we are now sending two messages, system message and user message. And let's try again. Hit G, generating, it's much shorter. And the next thing I want to do is not only we want to log into our console, but we want to display in our web page. So to do that, maybe we can use p.text function. So display some message at 50x 50y position. We haven't created MSG message variable, so we're going to have to create one. But let me change the name. I'm just going to call it AI text because it's AI generated. And come up to the top inside the sketch function. But outside of setup function, I will create let AI text, and the initial value will be just empty string. So because AI text is empty, we are not seeing any text on our canvas yet. But the moment we get this response, then we can set AI text to be response.message.content. So let's go back to our browser and hit G again. It's generating, and the response is here. Maybe it's too small and too dark, so let's update that. So p.text size to be 36 pixels for now, and then p.fill to be just white. Try again. Okay, that's better. And you know that p.text function takes optional arguments to define the size of the text box. I can say something like 300, 600. Maybe 300 was too small. 500. That's much better. I mean, we can spend more time adjusting these styles, but we'll just move on for now. And the next step is number 2, adding an HTML input element, because we don't want to just send the same prompt over and over again. So instead, I want to create a text box input element in our HTML page so we can interactively chat with the model. I'm going to come to index.html in our project directory, and here I will add input element. So the type will be simple text. Name, we don't really need it because we are not really using a web form, and the value will be just empty, but I will add an ID so I can select from the P5 sketch. ID will be prompt. And you see here there's an input element. So let's set it up in our P5 sketch. I'm going to come to the setup function. Right after we create canvas, I'm going to select the input element we just created, p.select, and we can pass the selector. We added an ID called prompt, so # prompt, and we'll store that inside, we'll call it input box. And I will add an attribute to this input box called placeholder, and I will say type your message. Oops, there was a typo. Then you can see there's a placeholder text. The placement here is all wrong. So we're going to have to style it to maybe place it at the bottom of our page. We can do that with P5 because P5 has style. You can totally do that, but I prefer to do it with HTML and CSS if possible. So I'm going to go back to index.html, come to the style tag, select the ID prompt, and I'm going to keep it simple for now. We just want to do some tests. So width will be 100%, height will be 50 pixel, position will be absolute, bottom 10 pixel, left 10 pixel. So now we have this input box at the bottom. It's slightly cut off on the right side because of the bottom and left value that I gave it. I'm going to have to adjust the width a little bit. So I'm going to calculate it. 100% minus 20 pixel because it's 10 pixel on each side. And now it's looking a bit better. Let me also add font size of 24 pixel. Now we can type here. And the next thing to do is we want to type some message like hi. And then when I press enter, return key, I want to send this message in the input box to the p5js sketch and also to the Ollama so that it will process and return the response. Right now I can type a message here, but it's not going anywhere. So that's what we're going to look at next. First, how do we detect the enter key press? I'm just going to get the DOM element itself by using this ELT field, underlying HTML element. So we can use all normal HTML methods on this. So input box.elt. So now we are no longer using P5 code on this object. Instead, we're directly manipulating HTML element. I'm going to add event listener. So what event are we listening? Key press. Then we're going to get that event and do something with it. Let's first console log this event, just so we know it's working. So anytime we press a key inside this input box, we will be logging that event. Let's open up console and start typing. Then there is a event, keyboard event, and it also displays which key was pressed. Here, key was E. So will it detect when I press my return key? Yes, it did. And it was registered as enter key with uppercase E. So this is what we're looking for. Back to the sketch. So I'm going to add an if statement. If e.key equals enter, then let's first test it. Enter pressed. That's what I want to log. So I'm typing, nothing is happening, but the moment I hit return key, it says enter pressed. Now it is detecting that key press. What we're going to do inside this if statement, we want to get a value from this input box and then store it in some variable. I don't want to create a local variable here because then I cannot use it in any other places. So instead, I'm going to have to come up here and make another string variable. Let's call it a prompt. It'll be a user prompt. It starts empty. And then when I press enter key inside the input box, then that value will be stored in the prompt variable. And then what do we do with this prompt variable? We want to send it to our model as a user message so that we will get some proper response back. So where is our code that sends the request to the model? Right now, we have it inside this key press when we press G. But now we don't need to press G. We will replace it with input box enter key press. So I'm going to copy these 4 lines of code and put it within the if statement. Then I can just remove key press. We don't need it anymore. And then we get the same error we've seen before. Await expressions are only allowed within async function. So where do we put this async keyword? We are inside this callback function here. So I'm going to put this async keyword and then everything looks good. And then when we are generating, how do we pass our prompt into our generate function to this object role user content? So we don't want to ask this why is the sky blue question again and again. So we want to replace that with our prompt. But because this generate function is outside of sketch scope, we cannot just replace that with prompt. It doesn't understand what prompt variable is. So we're going to have to pass it as an argument to this generate function, prompt. And now back to when we call this generate function here, we pass our prompt here. It can be a little confusing because it is called prompt in our sketch function, but it is also called prompt in our generate function definition. This prompt, it just represents this argument, whereas this prompt is our own local variable inside our sketch. So if it's confusing, I can just change it, maybe message, then pass the message into our user message content. It's the same thing. Now let's come back to our browser and type some question. I'm going to ask, tell me a joke. It's generating. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. So now we are successfully sending our input text to the model and get back our response and display on our p5js canvas. But I don't like that after I send my message, it still remains here. So I want to remove this text once I hit the return key. So let's fix that. So after hit the return key or enter key, we copy the input box value to our prompt variable. And after that, we can just set input box value to empty string. How are you? And now the text is gone and we still get the response back. So now we've checked off first 2 items from our list. We are making successful Ollama JS request, and then we've created an input element. And the next thing is how to keep the chat history. Because right now, every time we send a request, we start a new chat session over and over again. So let me show you what I mean. I will say, tell me a joke, and I say another one. What I meant by another one was another joke, but it doesn't understand, ready for another chat. It thinks that I'm starting a new chat because it doesn't have the chat history. So to keep the chat history, when we send a message, we want to send not only the current message, but also all the previous messages that we've been chatting about. That's why it's an array, so we can send multiple messages. So instead of replacing and sending new messages array each time, we will have an array that holds all the messages we have created so far, and then append a new message to that array. So let's try this. Right at the top, right after import statements, I will create a variable. This will be an array called chat history. And then inside, I will copy this system prompt. And then when we send the request using this generate function, instead of just sending the newest message, we will send the entire history. So we'll have to change this bit. For the messages field, I will send the entire history. And then now all we need to do is just keep track of this chat history by pushing new message to this history array. So whenever we ask a model for the response, it will be looking at the entire history. Because we've updated our generate function definition, we're going to have to update when we call the generate function. First, when we get user prompt into this prompt variable, I'm not going to directly pass it to our generate function because now we have to pass the entire history. So I'm going to push to this array. Role is a user because we are getting a user prompt. The content will be this prompt variable. Oops, this should be an object, not an array. So we push the newest user prompt to the chat history array, and then we send the entire chat history to the generate function, which will send it to the model. And after we get the response, we also need to push the AI response to the chat history. So it will always be user prompt, the AI response, user prompt, AI response. So that's the history of our entire chat. So after we get the response, I'm gonna push one more time, response.message. Role will be assistant, and the content will already be filled with AI response. Now let's test it. Tell me a joke. Okay, we got this. I'm gonna just say another one. Will it understand the context? Yes, it did. Now it's telling me another joke. Let's say just another. There's another joke because now we are sending the entire history and it understands the context. So that was number 3. Now number 4 is to convert canvas text to HTML text. Right now, this text is drawn on the canvas. It's okay, but it has a problem. If I try to select, I can't because it is a drawing, not an HTML text. But sometimes, when you ask AI some question, you get something back, you want to select and copy, but right now we can't. So we're going to have to convert this canvas text into just a regular HTML text we can drag and select. So here I'm going to have to update my HTML page structure a little bit. And here's how I'm going to do. First, inside the body, we will have a main element where our main content will be sitting in. And inside, I will create a div. This has an ID of container. It contains all our chat interface elements. And inside, I will have a canvas. And I will add an ID called my-canvas. I will have another div, which will contain chat bubbles. So I will call it chat-container. And inside each chat bubble will be represented with a paragraph. There are 2 types of paragraphs. One is coming from user, and then other is coming from assistant. And these two paragraphs will just be a placeholder. So let me just put some temporary content. How about we add 2 more? And on a page, we see these 4 paragraphs. It's not styled at all. So that's what we're going to update. And I will also move our prompt input into the container. Okay, now it's time to do some styling. Writing CSS code isn't really the main focus of this video, so I will do it pretty quick. Again, I will share the complete code on my website. And again, I thank those of you who support my channel. I think we have the basic styling done. So basically it's a full screen canvas, full screen layout, and it's a responsive layout. So it responds to the changing width and height. And the user prompt is now aligned to the right side. And the assistant response is aligned to the left, just like how you would use and expect from a chat application. And the text is bigger, there's more space, it's nicer to look at. And of course, you can update these colors, these chat bubbles. So if you look inside, we have 2 different types of paragraphs. One has paragraph with class assistant, and the other has a paragraph with a class user. So these are the background colors. So if you want to change it, then maybe you can change it to something more blue. I reduced the opacity, but you can just make it completely opaque, and you can also change the color of the text. And the background, this gray background, is coming from our canvas, p5 canvas, meaning you can come to this index.js, go into the p.draw function, and do whatever you want. So I can make the background much brighter. Oops, it didn't work. So there's a problem. So let's fix it. What's wrong with this? Let's go into our main container. All right, so I made a mistake. So I created my own canvas with ID of my-canvas, but I'm still using p5 created canvas here. So I haven't connected this canvas yet. So that's the next step. So let me have my console open, back to my editor. So on the top, inside the setup function, we use create canvas to create a new canvas. But instead of creating a new canvas, we can use any existing canvas by selecting that element. To do that, we can pass optional arguments. So after width and height, there's an optional argument. You know that's optional by this question mark. So first, we need to set the renderer. I'm going to just set it to, for now, P2D, because it's a 2D sketch. But if you want to try 3D shader sketch, it will have to be WebGL. For now, I will just pass P2D. Next argument is this optional canvas object. Optionally, an existing canvas can be passed using a selector. You have to select the element itself using document.getElement by ID or query selector. But that's what I'm going to do. Here, I will say document query selector with ID of my canvas. Why my canvas? Because that's how I specified as an ID to my canvas. So I'm just going to use this value. Now, when you look at the DOM, the p5 canvas is gone. And now we're using this my canvas. And for this canvas, I picked a very bright background with 200 as a value. If I change that to, say, bright yellow, you get this bright yellow background. So this is the canvas, meaning you can draw anything you want here. So I can draw ellipse at p.width over 2, p.height over 2, 200, 200. By the way, let's delete this AI text because we are now dealing with all the text with HTML elements, paragraphs, instead of drawing text on the canvas. So I'm going to delete it, save it. So now we see this circle. So you can even animate, I don't know, maybe add a bouncing ball, or particle generator, whatever you want to do here. I think this yellow background is maybe too bright. Just gonna change it to something much darker. And let's just comment the ellipse out. Okay, so these are the temporary chat bubbles. It only works if you add a paragraph element with the proper class. So this has a class called user, and this has a class called assistant. Whenever we send user prompt or get a response, we have to set them up as new paragraphs and also add those proper classes, user or assistant. That part of the code hasn't been implemented yet. So I think that'll probably be our last step of this video. So let's try that. Here, inside this if statement that runs when we press the enter key, when we get this user prompt, I want to make a new paragraph. And you can do that with p5, p.create_p function. And inside, we can set the text content, which is just prompt. So whenever we get a user prompt, we create a new HTML paragraph element. I'm going to store that in a variable called, let's just call it user p, user paragraph. And then we will set a class to this user p element, user. Why user? Because that's how we set our CSS. Let me go back to index.html. If you look at it, p.user is aligned to the end, meaning to the right, and it's got its own background color. The assistant will have its own background color too. But for now, user paragraph first, user p.class user. And we will also need to set its parent element to be our chat container. So let's try this. Hello. And now it's added on the right side nicely along with other chat bubbles. And the next step is to add the proper paragraph and class to our assistant response, which is here. After we get the response, we push that to our chat history, and then we pass the value to AI text. And after that, I will create a new paragraph called assist_p, p.create_p, and its content is AI text. Then assist_p will have a class called assistant so that it will have proper style applied to it. And then we will also set its parent to chat container. Now let's test it. Hello, and we're waiting for the response. And then voila, we get this nice chat bubble displayed correctly. So we can continue the conversation. Tell me something funny. And one more. And we get response back. But the problem is, as more contents are added at the bottom, it is hidden. So we have to manually scroll down. I think it'll be much nicer. Anytime we add a new paragraph, it'll automatically jump to the bottom. And that's pretty easy. So anytime we add a new paragraph, user paragraph and assistant paragraph, we will change the scroll position. So that'll be our chat container. So we're going to have to first select it. So how about we select it outside of our add event listener, because we will be using it multiple times. So const chat container p.select with ID chat-container. So first select it, and then after we create a user paragraph, chat container.elt, just so we get the raw HTML element. The scroll top is chat container.elt.scroll height. I think that's quite mouthful. So how about we create a function for that? So here I will just create scroll to bottom, which will take element argument. Element scroll top will be element scroll height. Then I'm going to replace this line with this function we just created, scroll to bottom. The element is chat container.elt, the raw HTML element. I'm going to copy this function and use it again after we create a new assistant paragraph. Okay, so let's try it again. Tell me a story. Another one, please. Okay, did you see that? It was jumping. and scrolling to the bottom. Let me try again. One more. Hit enter. Yes, it's jumping and jumping and scrolling to the bottom. We can always scroll up and down to check the history. And we still have this placeholder bubbles. How about we remove them? Maybe we'll need it later, so I'm just gonna comment them out. We can start fresh. What's the age of our universe? Okay, I'm trying to get some longer response just so I can see the scroll one more time. Tell me more. Tell me more about this universe, the age of the universe. Yes, it understood the context as expected, and scrolling works, and responsive design works. I think that's the end of our video. There are quite a few things you can do to improve how it works and also the design of it. For instance, what happens if I make a new request before I receive a response? How does it handle? We don't have the logic for that yet. Or how do you format this response a little better? I think there are plenty of things to do, but I will leave them up to you. If this video was helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.